50% of your 30 to 50% of your fractures produce 80% of your hydrocarbons.
That lends a lot of credibility. If you come in and can be upfront and honest and say, actually in this application, I think this product over here that I don't represent would be better for you. That all of a sudden now you become a trusted advisor rather than a salesman.
And I often say that we have all the requirements of space, right? Because it has to go underground and send us data from miles and miles away, and it has to work. Like, failure is not an option.
We'll put on, a standard mule shoe. Ours is slightly different just for that, but it's, everybody's got one.
The top drive and the drawworks really don't care whether the electrons coming at it are from a joystick or a PLC.
The panel, what you see here on the left, which is now controlled by one of my students, is showing you actually the control of our brakes.
As of now, geothermal is a pretty small market.
If you have tortuosity, the casing will be up against the side on part of the well. There won't be any cement there. The cement will have crescent around it.
So managed pressure drilling, it's been defined as a process to precisely control the pressure profile in the wellbore.
The key is being transparent with our clients in this case. So tell them what happened. If we had a failure, tell them exactly what happened. Whether it's our fault, whether it's whatever the issue was, we need to be transparent.
I think it's very important for everyone in the industry to know what's out there and kind of what's happening downhole as well.
I've probably worked on over 40 different performance limiters in my career. If I miss any of those and the computer is raising weight on bit and I miss any of those, I have a train wreck. The computer's going in the ocean.
Here's your new colors, here's your new thing. We don't do that
at all. Here's the tattoo you need to get.
Yeah, here's the tattoo. Sorry about the last one. We used to fake that all the time.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the V-Door Locksmith Show, where we are unlocking the secrets to success in the oil and gas industry, one interview at a time. I'm your host this week, David Gibson. As always, I'm your host, so there's no point in even saying it this week. But there we go. There's my mistake for the week. Get it out of the way, because we're going to have an amazing show for you guys. I'm so happy that everybody is here. If you guys can hear me, please let me know. The comments thing is rolling in a little bit slow. It's kind of did this last week as well. I know we've still got plenty of people out there watching. So guys, let me know where you guys are watching from. Always want to be able to hear that. Also this week, I am curious to know, what was the most troubling well you have ever been a part of? So I know we've all had one where it was just back to back to back issues. So what was your well from hell? Because I know it's what everybody calls it. What was your well from hell? Please put that in the comments. We'll be putting them up on the screen the whole time while we're going through this week. We've got an amazing show. Like I said, this week we've got Ed Stockhausen in here to be able to educate all of us on many, many things. Most importantly, the Stockhausen Effect. He is retired. He is living in North Carolina. He's doing completely different stuff with his life now. But I was able to, after constant pressure, be able to rope him back in to be able to come in and be a part of the show, because I think he's got plenty to be able to educate tons of us on. Even after being in the industry for so long and being retired, there's still lots out there for us to be able to learn from. So we've got people tuning in from, Gabriel Vela tuning in from Tomball, Texas. Gabe, thanks for being here, man. Appreciate it. We've got Oscar from Bogota. Oscar's always promoting the show. So Oscar, I really do appreciate that. Thank you so much. It means a lot. We've got Andrew Quinlan. Andrew, thanks for being here. Salim tuning in from Algeria. A LinkedIn user from South Texas. I don't know who that is, but thanks for being here. Let's see. Mike said 25K plus Cat Creek well in Oklahoma. Yes. Oklahoma wells can be tough. All right. Bogey from Dixon Directional tuning in. Thanks for being here, Bogey. Appreciate that. Rafael since Paraiso, Tabasco, Mexico. Thank you, sir. Oh, good day from Perth, Australia. That's what I'm talking about. That's where I started my career, was in Perth, Australia. So that's awesome to be with you. Felipe from Brazil. Good morning, sir. Let's see. We've got another one. Somebody else watching in from Tomball, Texas. Alex. Alex is part of Dixon Direction. So maybe they're sitting in the office together. Or if you guys are actually watching on multiple computers, that's even better, because then it bumps the number one a little bit more. We've got Moscow tuning in with Alexander. Nigeria coming in the house. Mustafa, thank you, sir. All right. Anybody else? Feel free to drop the name of the wells that you guys. Ricardo, thanks for being here, man. There's so many people that tune in on a regular basis that I have to tell you guys, thank you so much. I really, really, really do appreciate it. It's individuals like yourselves that help to be able to grow the show, that be able to help us be able to get even more guests on. There's a lot of people in the industry that I through conversations and talking to people, we're starting to really get some good feedback about the show and about how this is making a difference. And that means a lot to me, but more so, I think it means a lot to the other, our fellow colleagues and fellow people that are here in the industry. So just y'all being able to tune in, being able to bump the numbers and being able to get this thing going, adding comments, adding likes, you guys hit the little buttons down there at the bottom if you can. It makes a difference, and it's helping not only me, right, but it is helping everybody here in the industry. So thank you guys so much. Tagat from Kazakhstan. That is awesome. I cannot believe it. Julia from Louisiana and Gordon Technologies. Leonardo in Houston, Texas. Kay Jackson in Dripping Springs. Hey, that's just north up the road. I'm down here in Wimberley. Man, you should come down and hang out sometime, sir. All right. Like I said today, guys, the question is, what is the well from hell? Put it down in the comment section. If I can pronounce them, read them off, even though like well names are getting extremely long, especially the ones out in West Texas. But if you guys can't put the well from hell that you worked on, that was just an absolute train wreck for you guys that you were out there on, put it in the comment section. We'll get it put up on the screen. And as always, let us know where you're watching from. Jack Willis tuning in from Liverpool. Glad to see you guys here. Adam Patton from Trinidad. That's a place I've always wanted to take a trip to. Trinidad and Tobago. I've always wanted to go down there. So, and my mom's tuned in from right down the road. Thanks, Mom. Everybody, that's my mom. If you need video production work, that's the person to be able to hire. So, guys, I got a big request. I've been forgetting to do this the past couple of weeks. A huge, huge, huge request. If you guys can, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. It costs you nothing, and I don't make any money out of it. It's just so that I can broadcast live from a mobile platform. I've got a crazy cool idea, something I want to be able to try out for a live show. It won't be live on LinkedIn. Probably won't be live on Facebook. It'll only be live on YouTube, but it is a crazy cool format, something that I've been working on for a while. But the only stopping point is that YouTube won't allow me to broadcast live mobilely until I have 1,000 subscribers. And, since the beginning of the show, we haven't been pushing, the YouTube stuff. So now I've got to be able to kind of start pushing that. And so if you guys can, if you jump over after the show, during the show, or whenever, at some point in time, just go over there and do that. And for all the people that are tuning in from the K&M pre-tower show, thank you guys for being here. We do appreciate that. Just before our show started, the hour prior, was the K&M Engineering Advisor Group. They were doing their pre-tower show talking about well completions in difficult wells. And so I was able to tune in for about 20, 30 minutes of the show, but it still had a lot of stuff I had to get done here. So they had a great show. I really enjoyed some of the information that they put together. So anybody that finished watching that show and then is now tuning in here, we do appreciate you guys being here. Vasily tuning in from Aberdeen. We've got Scott Deaton, not Dixon, Scott Deaton. Good morning, sir. Working over there at Rhyme. Those are some awesome guys. Love having them here. All right, so we've gone through most of the comments and stuff. Guys, like I said, always let us know where you're watching from. All right, so we missed it last week because that was my fault. We're going to have it this week, the Minute with Fahim. Right. So I messed up last week. I forgot to get in touch with him and make sure we had everything lined up. But now we've actually got everything ready to go. So let me pull this up, and then you guys will be able to hear from my engineer Fahim, which is an amazing guy. He's doing awesome artificial intelligence, data scientist stuff. Like, he's doing amazing stuff for me. I'm not going to be able to keep him employed. So if you're looking for somebody of that nature, he is the person to be able to get on your team, and I have no problem with somebody stealing him away. Not that I want that to happen, but he's destined for bigger and better things than working for Gibson Reports. So let's bring this one on. And there we go. Minute up, or your minute starts now, Fahim. Go for it.
Hey, good morning, everyone. So today, real quick, I want to talk to y'all about the Python Developer Survey 2020. So this is the official survey that's going around. And, this survey serves as a major source of knowledge about the Python users community. And, Python's been around since like the mid 1990s, but they've only had this survey 3 times, right? And this is the 4th time that they're ever having it. So it's just a short 10-minute survey, and they really do use all the feedback from this survey. So, last time I mentioned that Python 3.9 got released. Where did they get the ideas about the bug fixes? This survey. Where did they get the ideas about, what new features the users want? This survey. So, if you or anyone in your organization uses Python, I would highly recommend to take this survey. So, you could actually convey your thoughts or, any complaints you have about it. And also, one thing to mention, the coders know that we all value our time a lot, so no one even wants to take a 10-minute survey without incentive. So they will pick 100 winners after the survey to win a, quote, amazing surprise Python gift pack. So I don't know what that's going to have, but if it's anything like last year, where only 24,000 people took it, you'll have a pretty high chance of winning that gift pack, right? And I mean, it ultimately helps you, the user, take the survey. So yeah, that's all I wanted to mention this week. I'll put the link to the survey somewhere in the comments. If you use Python, you can go and take the survey. It's not bad at all. And yeah, that's all I have for this week's Minute with me. David.
Oh, dang it. No, I messed up. I can't forget. I had to click back off of that. So, Fahim, thanks so much for being here, and thanks for being an awesome employee, sir. You are doing amazing things for Gibson Reports and for the industry in general. We do appreciate it. So now, guys, let me pull, because I've got so much of this stuff. It's hard to be like on the show, do all of this stuff. We kind of did the intro. We're almost to, it's not even really a class time. This is going to be more of a discussion this week. So we've got the, we are starting this week. We are starting season 2 of how it's done. If your company wants to be a part of how it's done, if you haven't seen those videos, be sure to go over to the YouTube channel and check them out. You can also find the links on LinkedIn as well. But if your company wants to be a part of that show, please get in touch with me. We are in the process of getting filming started Monday of next week. We're going to shoot them all. We're going to get them all edited, and then we're going to start popping those things out as soon as we get everything done. So if you want to be a part of that, please get in touch with me. The last 2 days, I was in Houston meeting with companies who want to be a part of it and talking to a lot of people. So the spots are filling up quick. We can definitely expand the season. So there is no hard deadline, but as soon as we kind of start to get filled things up and we have what we feel like is a pretty good lineup for season 2, we'll probably cut it off at some point. So the quicker you can get in touch with me and let me know, the better. So check this out, and then we will be back with our guest for the day. All right, and we are back with our guest of the day, Ed Stockhausen. Ed, thank you so much for being here, sir.
Oh, thank you for inviting me. It's, like I said, as you said in the introduction, it's taken you a long time to get me to finally settle down. And I'm actually in Houston today in Spring, Texas at my son's house. So we're trying to help him move things. So when you retire, you don't necessarily stop working. I've been actually working partly harder since I've retired, doing landscaping and other things, but it's nice to get back and be able to contribute to your program and kind of get some of the stuff. When I left the industry, I still had a lot of frustration, especially about this Stockhausen Effect thing, and it's still not solved. But I keep on hearing rumors from my friend Bill Lesso, who wrote a paper this summer at ERTech, and he talked about the Stockhausen Effect, and there's some geosteering companies that are actually trying to address the Stockhausen Effect in their software. So with that, we can get into start
Yeah, well, give us a little bit of background on what is the Stockhausen effect, and I also have one personal question in there with it, because I know that you wrote that paper with Ross Loudon, Bill Lesso, and yourself, correct?
Yes. Yeah. Well,
So,
the original papers. I mean, the original Stockhausen Effect. Well, it's Ross Loudon, who was supposed to be my friend. That after we wrote a paper on this concrete block drilling test, he goes, and the next paper he wrote says, "Oh, we have this thing called the Stockhausen effect." So he named it, but we've been, talking about it for years, since actually 2001. The first time I presented this stuff was back in 2001, or I actually started questioning this 2001 with the ISQA committee. So the ISQA committee is the Industry Steering Committee for Wellbore Survey Accuracy, and so I've done at least probably 50 presentations on this at SPE conferences, SPWLA, AAPG conferences, and we still never got anybody to really address it. So to me, the Stockhausen effect is basically saying that you're not taking enough surveys to be able to define the true shape of the wellbore. And so you're only taking 90-foot surveys, and you slide for 50 feet, and you rotate for 40 feet in the 90-foot survey, and you assume a minimum constant rate of curvature, then it's obvious, like even a geologist, as myself as a geologist, there's something that doesn't make sense to assume that is a constant smooth curve. So anything that causes the minimum curvature calculation to be wrong. So if you're drilling around a curve and you hit a tight streak and you get a really big dog leg off of hitting a hard streak, and you get a big dog leg and you have a different curvature because of the dog, then you're not capturing the true, trajectory of the borehole. So anything that happens either mechanically, because of the drill bit interacting with rocks, or a directional driller, or an auto, even with all these, what do you call it, the automatic. Now it's really sad. It's so sad that I can't. The difference between a motor and like an auto track tool. So what's the heck? And
the RSS, yes.
So, all right. What's the other? No, this is really sad. We have the automated drilling things that are tools that are supposed to actually steer themselves. I started questioning, like, how does the auto track tools work, and how do all the different rotary steerable tools work? And when you get it, the motors are kind of easy, because almost most motors all have the same kind of design and with a bend in it, so they're kind of easy to figure out. But when you start taking all these, the automatic, drilling systems, or what do they call it, rotary steerable systems. So the rotary steerable systems, they're all designed differently, and they have different methods built inside or programmed into them that can actually cause different curvatures in between surveys. So we'll get into that. All right.
So what do you think? What do you think possessed Ross to be able to call it the Stockhausen effect? Did you buy him a beer and convince him to do that, or did he just do it on his own?
It should have been the Lesso Effect. But I've been talking about it since basically I've been talking about this thing since about 2001 to 2003. And I've presented it so many times that it's I guess. So Bill would let me present our papers. So we jointly write papers, but I get up there and present it. So it ended up somehow got, attributed to me somewhere. I don't know. And as I said, I've been doing this since 2001, practically talking about this phenomenon that we're going to discuss today. And we went out to Salt Lake City, and we're at one of these SPE conferences for the drilling group. And it's actually where the Olympics were held across near. And we're having this big conference, and all these people are there. And I present this stuff, and at the very end of the presentation, they gave me this award of the St. Jude Award, which is the patron saint of lost causes. So I got an award for being the patron saint of lost causes, and this has basically been, here I am retired, and we haven't solved the problem. So, so I'm not exactly sure what motivated my ex-friend Ross to do this, but I still, Ross and I had some good times together. So
I was actually talking to Ross the other day. We actually have the ISC-WSA meeting coming up next week. So if you are in the MWD or directional drilling or in the drilling industry in general, one of the great things to be able to be a part of is the Industry Standards Committee for Wellbore Survey Accuracy, or the Wellbore Positioning Technical Section within the SPE. We will be having the conference. It's next week. I think it's like $10. It'll be 2 different days. So be sure to join in and tune in for that. Is a lot of the stuff where I was introduced to Ed was through the ISC-WSA. So Ed, go ahead and take us through what was the original paper? What was the original intent of what you guys were doing? You said you've been talking about this since 2001, or at least the early 2000s. What was the initial intent of what you guys were researching there?
Okay, so Bill Lesso presented a paper in 2001 in Amsterdam that I attended, and here I am as a geologist at the IADD drilling conference not IADD, so the International Association of Directional Contractors. When they have the big conference every year with SPE IADC, I think it's what it is.
Yeah.
And so I attend this thing, and Bill shows this graph. It'll be similar. Now, if I share my screen, can you see a graph here?
You still have to. There might be another button to click there, and then we'll be able to see it.
Not that one. So, can you see this? Is it working where you can see the graph or not?
You might have to still click another button down there. You might have to select which screen you want to share. No worries, though. Do have still plenty of people tuning in and letting us know. Hey, guys, let us know where you guys are watching from.
Share screen, share. I don't know. It seems to be locking up on dark. Maybe they'll have to show a picture or something, but
no worries. I can also pull up the. I think I can find the PowerPoint presentation that you.
If you have the concrete block drilling paper,
I will get that pulled up in just a second.
Now I'm locking up. Cancel. All right. Well, that's no fun. We should have practiced this a little more.
No worries. If anybody's wanting to get busy with this, they have obviously not watched this show before. If you guys are watching, let me know, how many of these shows have you seen before? Let me see here. I can get this pulled up.
Screen, but it doesn't show.
Fahim, if you are still watching, I need you to do something for me, sir. Go back to the studio.
Unfortunately, I don't have it on that one.
We got somebody tuning in from Pakistan, or from Pakistan for a job in Muscat. There we go. All right, give me just a second. We should be able to get this thing pulled up in here. Fahim, do me a favor. If you were still watching, sir, join the studio portion again. I'm going to get this PDF pulled up, copy, paste.
I can always, put up my little picture here.
Yeah, that was the picture that we started this whole thing with.
You started this picture with this one, right? So this picture here, is it big enough on everybody's screen now? Or?
I'll make it bigger. I'll take myself off, and so you'll just be able to talk yourself.
All right, so on this picture, which was the graph, this is actually from, it's kind of, well, I can't see what I'm looking at here. Cancel that. Okay, so on this graph, this came from Bill Lesso's 2001 paper that he presented, but it has this thing on the bottom down here that's showing, where is it? Yeah, these are the different slide intervals, and then you have these continuous directional surveys. So Bill started showing this thing with this continuous directional surveys and showing that the, and this is where we started looking at continuous surveys, and you can see that when you're sliding, the inclination would build angle. So this the little red dots are the angle building going up during the slide sections. And then in this case, this BHA actually had a drop tendency. So, so when you're rotating, this BHA was dropping about 4 degrees per 100 feet, and there, during the slides, it was building at 13 degrees per 100 feet. And and then you take these 90-foot surveys, but so the 90-foot surveys, which are represented by the blue line, connecting the dots of the 90-foot surveys, it says that you had a constant build rate of 3 degrees per 100 feet. So, so here I am as a geologist going up, and I, in front of all these drilling contractors, is asking Bill these questions, and the way I remember it is Bill said, well, Ed, it's too complicated. You really don't want to know the answer. So it's like, really, Bill? So, that wasn't a very satisfactory answer. And Bill and I are best friends. We actually met in 1994 on a drilling rig in Bay Marchand in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico, about 3 miles offshore. And we've been friends ever since. And we talk usually about once a month. So, his answer that this is too complicated that I didn't want to know, and I started asking, how does this affect your, the directional survey accuracy? So we started working on this stuff together. We started making models and saying if you slide 50 feet and you rotate 50 feet and you take surveys every 100 feet, how much versus taking 90-foot surveys, how far off can you get from the directional survey? So we had all these models that we ran, and that's in this SPE paper 79917. And it showed that if you do a 50-foot slide and a 50-foot rotate, and you took surveys every 100 feet, you could be, if you took the survey at the start of the slide, you could be 25 feet shallower than you think you are. If you took the survey at the end of the slide section, you'd be 25 feet deeper. And all these papers all filed up, ready to show you. But anyhow, so these kind of things, it's like, all right, why, it's 25-foot TBD difference at the end of the curve is a big deal. And now back in the
so Ed, I've got back up on the screen there. This is the I see this is
here on the screen here. So you can see that, so these are. So let's go back a little bit to the first couple of slides on that. But these are different ones. Let's go down a little bit. We'll go to the one that had the yellow stripes on it.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Let's stop there for a minute.
Oh, okay. Okay, I can stop there.
And then I'll try to show my screen. So I got this little picture here. There we go. The picture of. So we were drilling these horizontal wells in Nigeria and other places, even the Gulf of Mexico. And the sandstone bodies that we were drilling in were 100 feet thick. Often there would be a gas cap on top and a water leg on the bottom. So these are massive, thick sandstones that had sometimes 10 darcies of permeability. They were just, these wells were going to flow anywhere from 10,000, like 10,000 barrels a day, 5 and 10,000 barrels a day. And they were strong bottom water drive reservoirs. So in a strong bottom water drive reservoir, when you put your horizontal well in, you don't want to put it into gas cap because you'll damage the reservoir, you'll lose some of the reservoir energy, and you don't want to put it down in the water leg. So you're basically drilling blind, you're drilling the curve, and you're hoping that when you land, you're exactly at the TBD depth that you want to be. So in those reservoirs, each foot of TBD on these really strong bottom water drive reservoirs was 100,000 barrels of recoverable oil per foot. So if you're 10 feet off depth at that time, you're 10 feet off depth, you would end up that's 1 million barrels of oil that you would lose in that well that you could have produced. If you put the well up in the gas cap, you would actually have to plug and abandon the well because you were not allowed to flare gas. So if you're 10 feet high, a lot of times we were trying to be 10 feet below the gas oil contact. So, so you lose $25 million because you put the well in the gas cap, and everybody said, well, Ed, you're geosteering, you should be able to figure it out. Well, when you drill these type of wells, you're just drilling from the outside, and you're trying to come in, and you really, when you get to the top of the reservoir, you say, well, I'm in the reservoir, but you're assuming that you're at the correct TBD. And sometimes we get it into the reservoir, it's like, gosh, this well's coming in 15 feet higher, or, the sands are coming in a little higher than I think. But, it said, all right, well, maybe my map's wrong. But, but you're assuming that the directional survey is correct. So in that case, if we had these deals that, we figured this thing out when we started looking at the paper that we could be 25 feet off. That would be like 2.5 million barrels, and at the time that was $100 a barrel. So that's $250 million you could lose in these really clean sandstone reservoirs by not having by the Stockhausen effect. So that's that should have caused alarm bells within Chevron all around the world, and so I started preaching this stuff, and I presented this stuff many times, and several companies started saying, hey, that's kind of a pretty big deal. $100 million to $200 million loss. And one solution was to go back and take 30-foot surveys. You took 30-foot surveys, you could be plus or minus 2 or 3 feet of accuracy. But, and so, you'd only lose a couple, $20, $30 million. But, so going back here, there was the deal is our drilling department had, or I got to be careful about Chevron and the drilling department. The drilling people have this metric called cost per foot, and the surveys cost, the surveys, 30-foot surveys instead of 90-foot surveys, you end up, it costs more money because you're taking rig time. So, somebody came up and they said, Ed, you took 30-foot surveys on this well, it cost us $58,000 more. So it hurt the cost per foot metric. And it's like, okay, but I put the well I saved maybe $100 million because I got the well in the right place. So, the economics were just, are there, and, but I still could not convince certain people to go back and take 30-foot surveys. So my big question is, right, I can't take 90-foot, 30-foot surveys, and can we combine the continuous and stationary surveys? And so my big quest was and I was working with Schlumberger at the time, and Bill was working for Schlumberger, and said, all right, come on, Bill, can we combine the continuous and stationary surveys? So when we wrote these papers, we all say that we combine the continuous and stationary surveys. So Bill and I came up with a method along with Wayne Phillips. Some people may remember him. And, we had this method, and I actually showed all this stuff to Angus Jameson, and he had a method and that he helped me with, and I paid Angus some money to do some of this stuff. Or Chevron paid Angus. And we had all these discussions about how can you combine continuous and stationary surveys. And then you did that, and so we did it, and I said, all right, great, here's an answer. So the papers actually say, well, the TBD based on stationary surveys is X, and the TBD based on the continuous and stationary surveys is Y, and we think Y is more accurate. But the ISQA committee is never, the biggest problem is we could never get the ISQA committee to come up with a method, quote, blessed method by the ISQA committee to come up with an error model that you could use for anti-collision. So that's kind of the big push that really got things started. And my biggest frustration is to get the ISQA committee to adopt standards that would allow you to create a survey error model for anti-collision. And we've never done it, as far as I know. Have you heard anything about that, David?
Let me jump back in here. Oh, that's the wrong screen. There we go. I'm sorry. I was still looking for trying to be able to make sure that I've got the correct PowerPoint presentation on here for you. I should say this. So we do have a couple of questions, and one of these actually comes in from Johnny. Johnny had posted something in there prior to the show, and so as far as being able to land in the right spot, he was asking, are there no markers as far as being able to your lead into being able to land in the correct spot?
Yeah. So on those, so on the drawing that I showed, basically there were a lot of markers. But the markers are all based on, you knew what geology layer you were in. So you could actually, figure out what layer you're in, but you don't know where you are relative to the gas oil contact. So, I know that I'm actually in the reservoir, because it's easy, I'll get a drilling break, I'll stop set casing. But TBD wise, I don't know where I am in TBD. So I actually don't know. Sometimes when we landed these wells, we didn't know if we were actually in the gas cap because I had a 25-foot TBD error. And I actually landed these wells in the gas cap. So you have these markers, but the markers are all assuming that you have the right, well, your TBD is all based on, what the surveys. And so I knew I was in the reservoir. So I know I'm in the reservoir, but am I actually down, 25 feet below the gas cap or actually in the gas cap? So a lot of times we would run density neutron log just to verify that we weren't in the gas cap. So there's a lot of stuff on, and when I teach the classes I would teach, and some of the PowerPoint slides, we would have these discussions about, all right, what could you do? Could you drill a little slight pilot hole, find out where the water contact was, and plug back, and then re-land the well once you found the water contact, or find a way to find the gas contact and back up. So, but the big thing is, if we just would stop, if we would have taken more surveys, we would have a lot more confidence in our TBD accuracy. Or if we would have the method for combining the continuous and stationary surveys, we would have felt we knew where we were TBD wise. So all these wells we drill in the Permian Basin and stuff, the geosteers, they could geosteer the heck out of, figure out where they are in the reservoir, or, they know they're in the right rock, but they don't know where they are in TBD. And when they have a strong bottom water drive reservoir, then TBD is really important for, when is the water going to break through, or when are you going to cone gas down or suck water up. So whereas, when you're doing all this fracking stuff, well, TBD is not, is not as important. So then it's like, well, all right, if I'm fracking, I don't need to worry about TBD. But we'll get into that as a second part of the discussion.
So we do have another question that came in. So Dan Alexandru, so what do you think about companies' continuous inclination or continuous azimuth? Are these tools a help with well placement?
Yeah, so I really relied on continuous inclination and azimuth. So a lot of companies only had continuous inclination. So I trusted the data. So I've been, trusting it. I mean, there were several wells I actually had, when I would run some of the Schlumberger tools, we had inclination at the bit, we had inclination at the MWD tool, and then they ran the spectroscope tool, and it had a third inclination. And so I've actually had wells with 3 different inclinations, so you can actually plot all 3 continuous inclinations. You would actually see that they all plotted on top of each other, but they actually were slightly out of phase with each other. So I don't have my little, if I could find my little video, we'd show that, but so each inclinometer, as you drill through a well, they'd have the same pattern showing the slide rotate pattern, but they could be out of phase because they're in different placements within the tool string. And so if one's a little closer to a stabilizer or one's further away from a stabilizer, they have different bending moments. So as the MWD tools are 6 3/4 inch on a 6 3/4 inch collar a lot of times, and the hole's 8.5 inches. So the whole BHA has 2.5 inches to move around inside that borehole, and sometimes you get different bending moments, and we could talk about that. So continuous inclination and azimuth are very important, but so going back to my biggest frustration is I was never allowed, as a operating company, I would create my own directional surveys. So I had my own method to do it, and I would do it, but I'm not allowed to submit a Stockhausen survey to the Texas Railroad Commission, right? Because I'm not allowed I cannot certify it. All right, so oil companies cannot certify their own surveys. People don't trust the oil companies for some reason to certify their own survey, say that they drilled on their own property and not on somebody else's property. So I was never allowed to, create a survey method myself, and I was relying on the service companies to do it. So the next point is that I kind of more recently found out that Schlumberger wrote a patent in 2000 on combining continuous and stationary surveys. So there was this patent written by Schlumberger, and it basically prohibited any other service company from creating a method to combine continuous and stationary surveys. I read every word of that patent 15 times, and they were so good at, well, if you have just inclination only, if you have inclination plus azimuth, if you have this, that, and the other, they did a great job on the patent. And I don't have the patent number, but it basically, so that a patent should have expired this year. So that patent should be expired. So therefore, get your crap together. Continuous and stationary survey. So get rid of the Stockhausen effect. And we can do it now because we should be able to, since the patent's gone. But I would, so this is something I'd go to other service companies like, why can't you combine continuous and stationary surveys? And they would never tell me. And I'm pretty sure, these patent things that the service companies fight each other about, my belief is that they actually kind of stopped each other, or, Schlumberger pretty much put the brakes on other people. Maybe not. I will be trying to be careful, but I'm not going to, now that I'm retired, a few things.
And you can say whatever you want to. Nobody's coming after you now. So what was the reception like after kind of going on, essentially, like you said, you'd presented this multiple times at SPE conferences, at AAPG, IADC conferences. What was the reception from other international operators as far as them changing their practices? And, obviously you said you left the industry still with some frustration, so it kind of foreshadows a little bit, but did you ever see anybody that really kind of took to this to be able to change the way they were, their drilling programs were put together?
So I've only heard a little bit, but like BP apparently, they started going into 30-foot surveys. So you need to take 30-foot surveys. So when you go back, it's interesting, and I'll go back a little bit more about, what is the, and what, why does this even occur? So what's the deal? So a lot of geologists are totally ignorant. Say, well, you should be able to trust the surveys, but and it's not as bad in most of the Permian Basin wells. The effect is pretty small. And so why is it smaller than Permian Basin wells? And then we had some other wells that we were drilling in the country where the effect was actually even bigger than 25 feet potentially. And it comes about by the ratio of how many feet do you slide versus how many feet do you rotate. So slide 80% of the time, then that's pretty much a constant, close constant curvature, and you'll have a 10% rotate. Whereas if you did a 50% slide, 50% rotate, that's where you get this plus or minus 20 feet or so. But we had some people that were sliding 25 feet and rotating 75 feet. And that could get you to be plus or minus 30 to 40 feet of TBD on the end of a curve. So the Stockhausen effect in the curve section diminishes by having longer slide intervals and and shorter rotates, because the whole issue comes in with the motor. Every directional driller has to know what the yield of the motor is. So is the motor going to give you 10 degrees per 100 feet, 12 degrees per 100 feet? So you have, every directional driller knows what the yield of their motor is. I hope, otherwise not want them on my rig, right? So if you put a BHA in your directional driller, you should have a pretty good idea that you're going to get somewhere between 10 and maybe 12 degrees per 100 feet. But, you're going to be within a couple degrees per 100 feet. And we always design the well to be less than that, right? So, if we knew that the motor was only going to give us 10 degrees per 100 feet and we had a curve designed at 15 degrees per 100 feet, well, we're never going to be able to drill the curve. We're always going to land too low. So, I'd always joke about it. Bill gave me this little BHA model and I'd carry it in my back pocket and said, directional drillers always have to have some extra dog leg in their back pocket that they could just kind of whip out their back pocket and I need an extra couple degrees on this next slide. So we get a little bit behind, you're going to, slide 100% of the time on that next, or maybe 100% on the next connection. So you always have to have extra dog leg in your back pocket as a directional driller. And so, you're going to have to, the Stockhausen effect is going to occur on every well in the curve because of this thing about having the extra dog leg. And some companies going to say, well, we got this rotary steerable tool. The rotary steerable tool is going to solve this problem. Well, the rotary steerable tools, there's one company that has this rotary steerable tool, and they said, all right, in this next interval, we're at 50 degrees here, and we need to be at 58 degrees at the next connection, the next survey. So they would program it in downlink and say, all right, I need to get to 58 degrees. So they had this one tool that would actually, it would build until it got to 58 degrees. And once it got to 58 degrees, it would actually go into a hold inclination mode. And which was like, all right, this is crazy. This looks just like drilling with the motor. So, because the BHA was drilling at 100% steering force and rotary steerables, building at 10 degrees per 100 feet, and we only needed to get 8 degrees in that 100 feet. So it would build for 80 feet and then hold for 20 feet. And I have several pictures that you can see actually in some of the papers that I presented or some of the presentations that I got these continuous surveys from rotary steerables, and they look just as bad as drilling with the motor. So when you drill with a rotary steerable, you're supposed to get this constant build rate, but it really comes into, a lot of it, rotary steerables, you have to start talking about steering force and steering directions and turning forces and turning directions. So here I am, a geologist, learning about all these parameters of steering force, steering direction, turning force. What the hell is a geologist? And I actually was getting pretty good at this stuff, but I could tell the directional driller, I want you to slide for 12.5 feet on this next section. So, because we're pretty behind. I could actually calculate I knew what the tendency was, and I could actually, we'd argue about how many feet to slide. So that's getting really sad if you're a geologist trying to tell your directional driller how to slide or not. But when it came to these rotary steerables, there's, if they put these things into this 100% steering force, some of these things are getting you 10 and 12 degrees per 100 feet in the 100% steering force. So if they can lower the steering force and say, all right, the design is 8 degrees per 100 feet, so let's do 80% steering force and try to just keep it as a constant curve. And that's, so there's a lot of stuff that I would love if I ever came back to the industry. And I was studying so much details on sliding versus rotating and tool face angles, and then started studying steering forces and vibrations and all this other stuff. But especially with the rotary steerables, is like I want to see a plot of every parameter can be plotted as a curve, and you can see. So there's other ones when you get into this hold inclination mode. I've seen this stuff. So you finally get the well landed, you're in the depth you want to be, and you say, all right, I want to drill at 91.5 degrees. And they type in, they downlink to the tool, say, hold 91.5. Well, how in the heck does the BHA with a rotary steerable actually hold 91.5? And it's like, that's a really huge question. It's like, well, this one does it this way, and that one does it that way. And, they type it in, but, they have to have some kind of closed loop with a continuous inclination that's reading the continuous inclination. and it's only so accurate, so kind of let it go up to 91.9. And when it gets to 91.9, the tool will automatically put in a steering force and turn the tool face vector down to 180 degrees, and it'll start going down a little bit. You know, or something like that, you know, and then it may go down all the way to 91.1. And then, oh shit, I'm going out the bottom, and then it turns in, it gives a 0%, you know, or 0 tool face. So these rotary steerables actually apply miniature slide rotate functionality sometimes, you know. Now maybe, but maybe, you know, maybe they have different methods. So if you had a, you know, so this tendency analysis is something I'll go back to again, is, you know, every directional driller has to know what is the steering, the build rate tendency or drop tendency while rotating versus sliding. And so sometimes while rotating, these BHAs, if they're in a neutral mode, will drop 1 degree per 100 feet, or they'll build 1 degree per 100 feet, or depending upon weight on bit, sometimes they can build 1 degree per 100 feet, hold inclination with a different weight on bit, or drop 1 degree per 100 feet with low weight on bit. And so, you know, the directional driller is going to figure that out pretty quick, and they're going to have to put in these short little slide intervals to get it back. So going back to my little example here of this, you know, we had these wells, and you had to take these wells and you had to hold exactly 90 degrees, you know, for the entire length of the well, and now you're drilling through an unconsolidated sandstone reservoir. Well, those BHA's motors in unconsolidated sandstone reservoirs, they like to drop a lot of times. So, but if you tell the directional driller that he has to hold 90 degrees, and they figures out, well, it's dropping 1 degree per 100 feet, you can always come along and put in a little 10-foot slide right before where the survey is going to be taken and get it back to 90 degrees. And every survey could be 90 degrees, 90 degrees, 90 degrees, 90 degrees. And you got, so a good directional driller can give you a perfectly flat well, even though the BHA is dropping 1 degree per 100 feet, but it appears to be flat. So, so that was something that really bothered me severely in my trying to talk. You know, so if you're sitting there as a geologist and you're looking at the continuous surveys and you're seeing these drop tendencies with these little 10-foot slides, and either to compensate for a build tendency or a drop tendency, you know, especially the, you know, and we have these things, and it's in a couple of the papers I presented. There's several, you know, examples of, you know, during what was supposed to be hold intervals that we'd end up, you know, gaining 1 or 2 or 3 or even sometimes 10 feet of TBD because of putting in these little slides to compensate for the build or drop tendency. And it's extremely frustrating. So I want to show another little graph here.
And if you guys do have any questions, please be sure to fire them off in the comment section. We'll be able to get them in here for Ed. This might be one of the last times you guys get to do this with him. He is retired.
So another one here on this graph. Let's see if we can get to this question.
Come up with it just a little bit there, Ed.
Is that better?
Oh, yeah, right there, right there. Okay, I'll take myself.
On this graph, it shows an undulating borehole. Now, when we're trying to drill these wells, we don't really want undulating boreholes. So we, you know, but if, you know, if you end up finding, so we were seeing that, you know, a lot of times we're trying to hold 90 degrees. Now, sometimes we've got undulating boreholes because the geosteerers do it. The geosteerers do it, it's not necessarily a good thing. You know, a lot of times we were trying to drill these slant wells and hold 92 degrees and be slanting up, or hold 88 degrees to slant down. But so we have these BHAs that are building above, you know, so in this case I'm showing, you know, go up here to 93 degrees, and then it's dropping to 87 degrees and going back to 93 and dropping 87. So if you have, any time that you are, you know, you have a reservoir, anytime you create undulations in a borehole, when you start producing it, you're going to get gas.
Come up just a little bit with that, Ed. We can't see any. We just see the top of the paper. There we go, up there.
All right, yeah, so you get you get gas, oil, and water will start separating immediately once you start putting these wells on production. And then the water can block, and these low permeability reservoirs that we have, once you get water down here in the bottom, you don't have enough suction. You can't actually draw the water up and over the hump, or the gas blocks it. So you can actually lose an entire well production because you went from, up and down below 90 degrees. So if you're, so we're getting these BHAs and we can't hold inclination. We end up building to 93 and we have to compensate and start dropping it. Every time you drop below 90 degrees and then build back up above 90 degrees, you're going to create these oil, water, gas separation in your well. And this plot here, this may be the bigger failure across the entire Permian Basin than anything else that we do. But since we don't have any production logs and most of those wells, we never, if the well doesn't produce, we're just going, oh, well, the well's just not producing, it didn't frack, the geologist put it in the wrong position. We'll never blame it on, directional drilling or undulation. So there's a guy named, I think it's John Smolin, has a lot of papers on, running production logs and horizontal wells, and he does, he's done a lot of classes on this. I think it's, so you should look up John Smolin, look up at his papers. He has books on this stuff. So, we need to avoid undulations and boreholes.
So somebody tag John in the comments, and then we'll get him on the Vidor Locksmith show to be able to talk about this from the production side.
Yeah, because it's the production side. All these undulations, can affect production. And a lot of these, there's a lot of what I call the hidden dog legs. So you have these dog legs from, I had this miniature BHA, I had a bit here, and I didn't put the darn batteries together. We kept it, darn it.
Oh, is that the one you made out of PVC?
Yeah, but I have a little miniature bit here. I can't find it. Hold on.
No worries. Take your time there, Ed. Hey, guys, if you guys are enjoying this, be sure to like, subscribe, share this with your friends, tag somebody in the comments. We're having an amazing discussion here with Ed Stockhausen. If you've ever seen Ed present before, whether it's ISCWSA or SPE, this is right on par with just being able to put out absolutely amazing information. So we do have some questions coming in. The undulating borehole is what we face in the Gavin field. Somebody's calling me right now. Not answering. Sorry. Don't worry.
Let me have one comment. So the deal with the like this stuff of well placement and geosteering is, so the geologist needs to know at all times whether they're cutting up section or cutting down section. And so, having this inclination at the bit. So a lot of times we can figure out the dip of the formation because we can see different boundaries. And, if we did have these, so my favorite tool is inclination at the bit, and my second favorite tool is a azimuthal gamma ray, or some kind of an azimuthal geosteering tool. It's like an azimuthal gamma ray tool. And, we have these things about smiley faces and frowny faces. And so having those, those available really helps out for the geosteer to figure out whether they're cutting up section or down section. Now, there's so many places that say, oh, we can't afford an azimuthal gamma ray. So, why not? You should put an azimuthal gamma ray. But in a lot of cases, we don't. So, so we found that, so if you're rotating along, you're coming down and you hit, what happens if the BHA hits a hard streak from the top? What's going to happen? So the tool's spinning around and it hits the top. Does it go to the right or to the left? So I'm going to ask your people a question. And then if that same tool hits and is spinning and it hits the hard streak from the bottom, which way is it going to go? So you got to think about the bits and the cutters, and when the bits come up from the bottom, they hit it, the reactive torque takes it in the opposite direction. And I've shown this before, where it hits it when it's coming around, it hits it on the bottom, it goes to I believe it goes to the left, and it hits it or if it hits it from the top, it goes to the left. If it hits it from the bottom, it goes to the right. So you may have this walking tendency that's could actually help your geosteerers. You can say, well, we keep on getting this left-handed walk versus right-handed walk, and when we were drilling down the curve, we were always getting a little bit of right-handed walk, and now we're getting left-handed walk. It could be that you've changed from hitting it from the top and then hitting it from the bottom. So if you don't have a rotary steerable, there's potential that you can actually, you can figure it with the directional drillers, work with the geologist, or you put some sort of, now that you guys are adding all these vibration tools and other things that they can, figure out if you're going left or right, a reactive torque, that tells you. So continuous azimuth can be very helpful. Maybe that would tell you if you hit it, you can see so you put your ROP right next to your continuous azimuth and you see, hey, the ROP changed here. I'm really there's all kinds of vibration going on, and I'm taking off to the left or taking off to the right. Then you can almost tell the geosteerers. So a directional driller could be a geosteerer. Yes.
They should have paid attention.
Lisa, I'm cutting up, Ed. I'm not cutting down. We're not going out the top. We're going out the bottom. You should be able to tell your geosteer what the heck's going on. On that. So,
all right. So we've got a couple of questions that are coming in here. So let me make sure I get. They're coming in quick now. Okay.
I gotta get to that one picture. You have the picture of the paper. I want to show that.
Which one is that? The where with the
let's go with the picture for 1 minute. So you had the.
Ooh, why is that blinking like that?
All right. So that one is that was the other part. Show that picture first. If you can zoom a little bit bigger on it, that'd be helpful.
Let's see if you zoom.
So this was actually this concrete block drilling test that Bill and I did and Ross Loudon did was actually one of the highlights of my career is these two pictures. And these blocks that you're seeing here are actually available. They're sitting out. If I can make them bigger on mine. So these blocks are actually sitting out in our Chevron Briar Park facility in between the parking lot and the training center. So if you actually want to see these blocks and see what it looks like when you go from a slide section to a rotate section. So we did this deal where we drilled through these blocks. We did a rotate section with a motor, and then we did a slide, and we found that you had this immediate inclination angle change at the start of a slide. So the other thing about minimum, all our geosteering calculations is it assumes minimum curvature occurs that you go from 90 degrees to 91.001 to 91.002 when you're going through a curve like this. So this well was right at 90 degrees, and or this borehole thing that we had going through these blocks. And once you started sliding, we got this instantaneous angle change by 1 degree approximately. So depending upon the placements of stabilizers and the bend in the motor, you can predict what the instantaneous angle change is going to be. So minimum curvature is already thrown out. Every time you slide, this is not a minimum. So minimum curvature is constant curvature, which means you're going tangent to a circle. So you're going a straight line and it's tangent to a circle. So this is what, I forgot the name. This is no longer a tangent anymore. It's a discontiguous curve. That means you have two curves that change immediately. They're not continuous. So discontiguous is a term that Bill Lesso came up with. And so you instantaneously go to 91.5 or 91 degrees from 90 to 91 every time you start. And you create this little lip. And here's your downhole geological target, Ed Stockhausen. And you can actually see what the bore, and there is very interesting that every time we did this, we always saw this, that this little lip wasn't perfectly in the center. So I still want a mechanical engineer graduate student to try to figure out why we always had about a 16-degree offset on how this lip is formed when you went from a rotate section to a slide. And it occurred 4 different times. So I can't say that I had a bad tool face reading, which we didn't actually have tool face. So on that one, and then let's go to the next 2 slides down. It's,
Oh.
Keep going down a little bit more. I don't know if that slide there. So this one's hard to see, but this is actually what anytime anybody's drilling with the motor, I really want to see somebody show all the tool faces. You know, where's the start of the slide? Where's the end of the slide? So the yellow stripes are showing the slides. The bottom graph is all the tool face data. Up here, I have some black dots and some red dots and some blue lines. So the blue lines represent the true architecture of the borehole, is that when you slide, so the start of the slide is where the yellow line starts, but the red dots are from the NWD tool that's 60 feet behind the bit. Well, the NWD tool is in the middle, it gets sucked up to the top of the borehole. So they would always show that it appears that the well started building angle before the slide started. But these little black dots here are actually from near bit inclination that was actually below the bend in the tool. And so you stop, so the black dots hold angle until the start of the slide. You push the tool face up to 0 and you instantaneously, so the tool just goes where it's pointed. So you turn the tool to a 0 tool face. Now you got 90, the bend is already pointed at 91 degrees, and the tool just goes off at 91 degrees instead of 90 degrees, or whatever the angle change is. And then it'll hold that until the end of the slide, and then when you start rotating, you actually lose 1 degree. So you gain 1 degree at the start, you lose 1 degree. So again, this discontiguous curvature. So these are the type of things that every directional driller and every geologist, and you throw in continuous azimuth on top of this, these are the type of plots that should be made. Start putting weight on bit, start throwing in. So I have other papers that show some of this stuff, and I think later on, I don't know if it's go down a little bit more, we might see something about where we hit you hit a tight streak, sometimes it'd be rotating along, and all of a sudden you see an angle change. Not that one. So, yeah. So
that's about all I've got there. This is the one.
That's good. So if you're sitting there and you're looking at continuous surveys and you're watching and they're rotating, kind of holding inclination, and all of a sudden it bounces 2 or 3 degrees, and and it starts to go to 93 degrees, you're at 90, so the geologist get on the phone, he's going to call up, what in the hell are you doing? The continuous survey say you're 93 degrees, and why you were supposed to be at 90. And so that issue comes up with, say, well, hey, I hit this hard streak here. Look at this, the ROP slowed down. I got all this vibration going on. My teeth are even chattering on the drilling rig floor. And it ends up being that it was the geology's fault, not the geologist's fault. It wasn't the directional driller's fault. It was, you hit some layer that deflected it. So to be able to know, who's to blame or who's not to blame is you got to be able to monitor, all these parameters simultaneously. So I think that's probably a good way to wrap it up and start questions.
Well, one question to be able to launch it. So you said there's obviously a difference between doing this in conventional wellbores versus unconventionals like the shale plays here in U.S. land. Obviously, is that just because of fracking the wellbore?
No, so the difference between the unconventionals, so the unconventionals a lot of times it's formations, and then you have these strong bottom water drive reservoirs, and you usually have gas caps and oil water separations in conventional reservoirs. And a lot of those horizontal wells, many of them are designed to be at a specific TBD if it's a conventional gas, oil, water reservoir. Now, some of the kind of conventional, are very thin siltstones, so if you have a very thin sandstone, like a 3-foot sandstone, and they have gas in it, and the gas, I've had some of these reservoirs that we've drilled, and you drill down through, you're drilling down through in this big oil field to go for the big pays, and then you see, look at this little 10-foot sand. It's, has a 2,000-foot oil column, and the top of the reservoir going all the way down, it's like, if we put a horizontal well in that 10-foot sand, we can make it economic versus, so that so if it's a kind of conventional sand play with a thin reservoir, then it's the same as rotary steerables. You just got to get in it, and you're not worried about, if you're not worried about water or gas, you just have to steer in it and stay in it. So that's where, but in the unconventional, you hate the word sweet spot. I just hate that word because we haven't really figured out how high fracs go, and we try to find out the most frackable part of the reservoir, but there's still, now we're doing 3 different levels sometimes in certain reservoirs who just, as I think Bill presented several times, it's really about maintaining spacing between wells. And so you're looking at both lateral spacing. So in the unconventional is like, you want to keep them, if you're vertically stacking the reservoirs, they need to be 200 feet apart. And then laterally, they need to be, maybe 600 feet apart. And if they start drifting towards each other or away from each other, then they start interfering and you get frac hits and things like that. So, anything we can do to improve the accuracy of the survey so we can maintain the spacing for the fracking. And that's where, once you start drilling these 15,000 foot long wells, the ellipses of uncertainty gets so huge. So is there a method by combining continuous and stationary surveys that you can make the ellipse smaller, or use some other method? Turn this off for a second.
I know it's not the rig, Colin.
No, it's my window washing. I think. So the unconventional is kind of, a lot of it is looking for these undulations to try to avoid undulations, looking at, trying to hold inclination, but, a lot of we want to find a particular layer to stay in and stay in that layer and not be going out the top and back in the bottom and out the top, or creating more undulations in the borehole. So there's, if you can find the right place, stuff in the Marcellus. If you got in this one reservoir, you could drill one section, like a 6-foot window there. You could drill at 9,000 feet a day. Whereas if you're like 10 feet higher, you're at 6,000 feet a day or something like that. You would lose a lot of your ROP. So, so it really comes in combining geosteering and then figuring out whether you're cutting up section or down section. The Marcellus was actually, some places in West Virginia, it was really nice and simple because it was all pretty flat. But boy, you get in the over in the Pennsylvania side, and the geology was going up 15 degrees and down 15 degrees, and sometimes the dogleg severity of the folds. So if you actually put the folds of the geology had a higher curvature rate than what you could achieve with the BHA sometimes.
All right, so let's shoot off with a couple of questions here. Let me change the little brand and banner thing. We're doing Q&A. So there we go. All right, so we've got a question that comes in. It says, from Alex, when will the industry's preferred survey method change from minimum curvature, and what will become the next standard?
That's
so predict the future for us, Ed.
Yeah, predict the future. So so this is where, this is so basically, if you start combining a continuous survey and a stationary survey, or kind of method, or some of these, there was a program that I was a little bit aware of trying to get really high accuracy gyro, miniature gyro chips. One company was trying to pursue this, and something that could be down, so you'd have continuous gyro information. So on that, if we're even combining continuous surveys, so once you got down to, so sometimes we'd have continuous surveys that were a little noisy, so we'd sit there, they are noisy, but we can average them over 5 foot and just take 5 foot surveys out of the, sometimes I had, 1 foot surveys on continuous, but it's like, all right, there's a little noisy, so let's smooth it out, and we'll just take a 5 foot sample or a 10 foot sample. And once you get down to 5 and 10 foot, then you could use any method, the tangential method, any method would basically, the accuracy would be about, you didn't have to use, because then you can't actually fit a curve from a 1 foot survey and minimum curvature. You'd end up having, well, it'd show your dog-leg severity sometimes to be, huge sometimes if you actually took the continuous, every continuous without smoothing, right? So they would scare the crap out of people. So that's the other thing is, one thing about continuous surveys and stationary surveys, you see the hidden dog-leg severity. So something we never really addressed was, and something I really want to address is, all right, so we know that when you're sliding, you're going to get 12 degrees per 100 feet with a motor a lot of times. And if you do a 30-foot slide and a 60-foot rotate, though, it's going to say that your dog-leg severity over that 90-foot section was only 3 degrees. So it's like, hey, look, I have a really smooth borehole. There's no kinks in it, but it's not. No, you have 12 degrees per 100 foot for 30 feet. And what does that do to your torque and drag? So so I didn't answer the question totally, but the other part, so some method of combining, continuous surveys with stationary surveys and whatever, some calculation method that would actually do it. I don't know the answer to that. That's Angus Jameson and his crowd.
Here's another one from Nader. Hello, Ed. Considering all the uncertainties with directional surveys, what would be the best method to properly shift the directional surveys to fit the reservoir properties within a 3D geocellular model?
So you're saying that, so this is one of the, I struggled with this one all the time. It's like, all right, so I have this beautiful map and then the well comes in and it doesn't fit my map. So I actually had, I've had geologists that say, and we had this, when we were drilling a lot of wells in this, we had wells coming from different directions. So we had a well coming from here going this way and a well coming in this way. They would be, in the same, theoretically the same thing, but we knew the thickness, we knew which layer we were in this well, what layer we were in this well. And then the vertical well next door said there should only be 20 feet between them or 50 feet between them. But based on the layer that we saw here and the layer we saw over here, it says, well, we're actually 60 feet apart. So we actually knew that there's a 20-foot TBD error based on, otherwise you'd have to put a fault in between them or something that had missing section. Well, that wouldn't make any sense. So, it's like we really struggled with that concept of having multiple stacked wells that the vertical thickness that they should be apart, but then when you actually figure out what layer they're in, they violate that vertical thickness concept. And I had crisscrossing wells coming from the east and west, and vertical wells going, 2 different ways. And we had actually had anti-collision practices that we would actually say, well, we are not colliding with this borehole, even though these 2 boreholes are crossing each other at 90 degrees to each other. And the ellipses are actually overlapping, so we were violating the anti-collision practices. But we would actually write these letters for exception saying we have geologic separation between the wells. So I still have struggled with that. So I've had some geologists in the geocellular model say, well, we know what they are vertically, and we'll just move the well to where it should be based on an average regional map. And so one guy actually did goal seeking and said, what do I have to change the inclination by to get the inclination to give me the answer that I need to make my model smooth? So, it's crazy, but once you start, trying to figure out, where is the oil water contact in reservoirs? You drill 100 wells through the same oil water contact, and they're plus or minus 15 feet. So we've always had this problem because of the surveys inaccuracy. What is the actual oil water contact, or where is the thickness of the zone? So I don't blame geologists for just moving. Once they actually see some of my presentations, they say, well, shit, hey, we'll just move the wells. That's all we have to do. Forget about it. We don't give a shit. In the Permian Basin, you can almost say that. I just need to, I know what layer I'm in. But so I almost give the geologists free rein to just ignore the surveys to make their cellular models work. That's scary, right? But the surveys, otherwise they have to compress, actually change the thickness of the reservoir. And, so do I actually lose or gain reserves by changing thicknesses of beds? Or do I move the well within reasonable limits? That's actually a very good question. It is one of the hardest questions I struggled with, is multiple wells that are too close together. So don't ever drill your wells too close together. That's the other way. So.
Well, thank you for answering that one, Ed. We do appreciate it. We got another one. So from James, it says, it's interesting. Which do you shift, the survey and pipe stretch or the mechanical earth model? Seems easier to shift the survey, but why?
So we never did talk about pipe stretch.
There were a couple of questions in there, but we kept going. So
yeah, so the pipe stretch,
I can always get Harold.
So because when you look at, and this is one of those things, we're drilling some really deep wells, 35,000 foot wells. And then you'd run LWD pipe tally measurements and the difference between wireline measurements and LWD measurements, right? And so it's been a huge struggle, and that on that, because the certain gamma ray event would occur at 35,000 feet on the wireline, but it occur at 29,880 feet on the LWD, or vice versa. And so I keep forgetting that, because the drill, the drill pipe is going to be, it's going to get hotter as it gets put in the well, and it's going to stretch. And so the LWD sensor is going to be, drill pipe based on cold surface temperature is going to be at one depth, but if it's because of thermal expansion, it's going to see the gamma ray event at a different depth. Whereas wireline, on the opposite, is when wireline gets hot, supposedly the inner core of the wireline expands outward, which makes the wireline shrink. So the wireline is wrong. The drill pipe tally is wrong, right? And they're both wrong. So therefore, geologists should be able to just make up anything they want. So we really struggle with that. So there is several companies that will try to do thermal, correct depths. So how do you correct the depth? And that's the difference between continuous surveys that are drilled when the pipe is in compression and the stationary surveys where the pipe is in tension. So they're never going to be on depth with each other either. So the one thing we were looking at was we would shift the continuous surveys to the stationary surveys by basically doing a depth shift to get them to match a little bit. But we never really took in thermal expansion or weight on bit and all that other stuff. But it's a huge challenge. So depth, we could talk about depth for people have had conferences on depth for 3 or 4 days, and then they come out the end.
If you guys are interested in more depth correction stuff, be sure to look up Harold Bolt. He recently put out I guess self-published, like an ebook. I keep meaning to go and look at it and read over it, but I just keep forgetting about it, and it's only I remember it during the show when we bring up
it is
pipe stretch.
And I've talked to Harold a this is really, it's painful to try to go through all that stuff. So the number of variables that go into what is depth. And then, I didn't show my little PVC model, but again, as I was saying, if I had 3 different survey sensors, but if they have 3 different survey sensors that place at a different bending moment inside a borehole, as they go from a straight section into a curve, they're all going to bend into the curve at a slightly different bending moment. And so they're going to see the same depth with a different inclination. And it's been like a half a degree difference sometimes. And with the same accuracy of the sensor. So the sensor has the exact same accuracy. They're all accurate to be 0.1 of a degree. But so this comes into bending and mechanical modeling of bending moments of the tool. So everyone gets bent around the corner differently because of where they are placed. So that's.
I know that there's some people working on stuff where they're putting multiple inclination sensors, or just essentially multiple directional NBID directional modules and tool at one time. I'm taking a lot of surveys. I have to also give a quick shout out to the guys over at Superior QC, because I think a whole bunch of them are watching and they're all talking to each other like they don't know who each other are. So thank you guys for being here and promoting not only Superior QC and yourself. So, and maybe one of these days you guys could get Chad to come on the show, because we would all love to be able to talk to somebody who's doing space program stuff before. So we got one more question in here and then we'll let you go. And I know you got plenty to be able to do. Ed, thinking of petrol or other reservoir models, what repercussions does a TVD correction bring to the production and maybe reserves? Is it worth it to retrofeed the corrections to the TVD of the existing wells? Leonardo, excellent question. Thank you so much.
All right, so let me think about this one a little bit. So it's, this was well, I want to go back a little bit on the depth corrections for the pipe stretch corrections. It was always like, so if you didn't do corrections for depth and TVD in real time, there was always a challenge. Is, I'm sitting there and I'm getting my surveys and I'm trying to fix all this stuff up. So I have one TVD depth and I start updating my models while I'm drilling, right? So the geosteer is going to update the model based on the surveys while we're steering. And then here's this other guy sitting in the background, he's messing around with continuous surveys. And a day later, he comes up with, oh, here's your new TVD corrected survey. So change your model. So so right now, because of and this is the huge frustration is, until we have, what is the most accurate survey? Because we'd go and run gyro surveys in wells that we drilled. So we drilled all these directional holes all around the world. And then, some of them were drilled back in the 1950s and they had acid bottle, whatever they had, old survey tools. Some were inclination only survey, and you had a map. So then you run a gyro and you find out the wells, 200 or 300 feet in a different place. And you'd have to update your maps and stuff. But, and then how do you feed that back to the unitization hearings and all that stuff? So, trying to figure out, so the geologists will sit there, change their maps all the time. And they'll try to take the most accurate survey, but the drilling department doesn't necessarily have the same survey as the geology department has. But, when do you apply corrections and TVD corrections and pipe tally corrections? So there's nobody, when you would take old conventional wells, nobody would actually perforate into a sandstone reservoir based on a wireline depth, right? You would always run a gamma ray on your perforation tool, and you would tie back in before you set the perforation gun. You're going to actually tie back in to make sure you find that reservoir before you perforate into the shale, because the different tools have different depth errors. So again, let's go back to the question. Could I see it again, or?
Let me see. Oh, yeah.
So the repercussion. These things like those big, strong water drive reservoirs. If I change the TVD by 18 feet in those reservoirs, and I've said I'm actually going to produce 180, 1.8 million barrels extra because I got it at this TVD, and I go to the bank and say, hey, I'm going to be able, now that I got the well in this position, I'm going to gain 1.8 million barrels. Give me some more money to drill the next well. Or if I went and said, well, I just lost 1.8 million barrels because I put it down near the water contact, you're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars in some cases, right? And the Permian Basin, this thing about, like I said, if you have multiple stack reservoirs and you're having to change thicknesses of sands or thicknesses of body because you get things that don't make any sense, then you're adding or subtracting to reserves. And how do you, and so ultimately the reserve people, we try to actually get the SEC involved with continuous and stationary surveys at some point in time to say, how can we actually use this when we're trying to calculate reserves for a reservoir, to say this is a this new method is going to provide us with a better method to put our better models, and we're going to be able to say that my maps are better than Joe's maps that are over there, and my reserve estimates are better, and of course I have more oil in my reservoir, and I don't. So if we make a unit, I get more money, and things like that. So
that is definitely an interesting route to go.
But when it really affects, the placement, when placement affect positions relative to fluid contacts, that's where you really start adding reserves or subtracting reserves, or it changes the thickness of reservoirs. Then, because when you're coming in and landing some of these wells, these little slide rotates, you can get a 15-foot TVD change in the last 400 feet of measured depth of a well on landing. So all of a sudden, the zone above all of a sudden is 15 feet thicker or thinner. Potentially. It's very confusing because it's like the vertical well doesn't say thin or thick. So geologists are going to change their isopac and their isocore maps. So they start changing thicknesses, and they're adding and subtracting reserves.
Well, Ed, thank you so much for joining us today. Any last words that you would like to be able to share with everybody out there? Any words of wisdom from the other side of oil and gas, being retired?
Well, I am enjoying my retirement. So actually, I'm living in Atlanta, northeast Atlanta. So, and we have a place up in North Carolina. But it's just, it can be challenging when you have older sons that need help. So things were simpler sometimes when I was working. I'm actually working harder on doing landscape work, but I got some muscles here.
Hey,
I've lost weight. So you can actually be healthier sometimes if you're not working staring at a screen for 12 hours a day. So take your breaks, do your ergonomic breaks, stay healthy so you can enjoy your retirement and enjoy landscaping stuff. So I got some pretty flower pictures of my house in Atlanta, but I do miss it sometimes. But I talk to a few friends every once in a while.
Well, Ed, thank you so much for being here on the show. Thank you so much for everything you've done for our industry, and all of the work that you've done that continues to push many of us forward to strive to be able to achieve some of the great studies that you and your cohorts have put out. It's been absolutely amazing to be able to have this conversation. It was definitely on my bucket list when I first started this show to be able to get you to come on and come talk. So from all of us, thank you so much. And for everybody out there that is still watching, guys, do tune in next week. We've got Fred Dupriest coming on the show. The week after that, I've got something lined up. I haven't been able to, it's taking some time, but I'm trying to get it everything solidified as far as getting the next guest on for October 30th. The week after that is Matt Flannery. The week after that is going to be Graham Mintz-Wilmot. Then David Ransom Wood with the I Told You So. And then December 4th, we're going to have Dr. Samuel Rubello talking about the history of mud boaters. So we've got an action-packed group coming up continuously every Friday at 10 a.m. Thank you guys all for tuning in. We've got a lot of people in here saying, thanks, Ed, long time no see. Ed, many thanks for sharing your time and your knowledge with us. Paul Johnson says, great to see you again, Ed. Timothy Patton says, thank you, Ed. Great talk. Armin, giving thanks to me. No worries about me. Leonardo, Ed, thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. And even Mika Wibbs. I used to work with Mika. Mika, how are you doing? She's got twins as well. So, hey, Mika. So thank you all for watching. Ed, thank you for everything that you've done. And we're going to keep this show rolling on next week with Fred Dupriest. So please, guys, be sure to tell everybody. We'll be doing limiter redesign in the real world with a Delaware case, something like that. It's something close to that. Like, I can't remember everything. So, guys, as always, thank you guys so much for watching. Let me get this pulled up so I don't forget it like I normally do. Thank you guys all for watching. I do appreciate it. And as always, know your industry.